So the footage you just saw was from a recent trip that I had to Japan, where I was invited to go check out this boxing gym with none other than this guy Ken, a legendary shoe repairer, and I'll tell you a story about that for another day. But long story short, as you do see here, I shot a film of him in his boxing gym just on my iPhone, and I got a lot of great responses and a lot of people asking me to share exactly how I graded the project, alongside a lot of people that absolutely hated the grade as well, which for whatever reason, I think it's just because people don't realize how different it is when you shoot something and the grade and potential look that you can push afterwards, especially with how much latitude Apple ProRes log has on the iPhone and just how capable these iPhones are. So today I wanted to share with you my process at how I graded this, and if you wanted to know in the future or learn more about my gear setup and how I shot particularly this entire sequence on my phone and the hardware involved, definitely let me know in the comment section below, because if there is enough interest like there was for this color grading tutorial, I'll definitely share how I did that. So if I jump over to the color grading tab, I can go over to one of the more complex shots, which was not that complex per se, but just to kind of show what the most frustrating thing would have been. Now, the way that I color grade is particularly this project is that I had 8 net nodes kind of set up, and it all kind of based around this one node here. Or these 2 nodes really did most of the work or the heavy lifting, with the other nodes just kind of acting as accessories to support these 2 nodes here. So if we disable all of these nodes here and start off with where I always begin with, and that is my color space transform node. This is essentially where I turn Apple ProRes log into an actual usable format. The way I personally use it is a particular LUT that I have made, which I'll leave a link in the description below if you wanted to check out. Don't feel like you have to do this or use this at all. You can just use Apple's like ProRes log or the log conversion LUT instead of this one. But I've just tuned mine particularly in a way that affects colors specifically, and it works really well for me. So that's what I like to do. So if I disable everything and enable, just to show you what this node is doing, and this is where I start off all the time. Everything will be gone apart from this. It'll just be this node. And as you can see, it brings the log image straight to a bit more of a Rec 709 look, or what you probably would see straight out of the camera. And the way that this LUT that I've kind of made in particularly is it does provide a little bit of a look to it already, but I always think it is a bit too on the warm side, particularly for this project. So I also just dropped down the temperature a little bit to make it a little bit cool. So if I kind of disable this, you can see it's very, very warm and doesn't quite suit, but the way Apple log works, it's really, you can get a really kind of gross color, because this is more of like an outdoor LUT that I've used in the past. And you can already do a big difference here, and you can say I've just brought it down by 300, which is a lot, but still it brings us to a nicer area. Now, what I wanted to do next was really darken this whole mood and look of the project. I found this like jazz track on YouTube from Hyperdrive Sound, which was awesome, and I wanted to make it a very different juxtaposition to what you would typically find in a boxing gym, which is like the heavy metal stuff. So I wanted it to be really dark and grungy, but also feel like an underground bar. So what I would do is then go over and work backwards. So I would start right from the start and adjust my exposure first. You can see that I've dipped down quite a lot of material here, and it's quite a lot darker. So you can see we're not quite crushing blacks at 0 like many people said I did, but I didn't. We're definitely going a lot darker. You can see it's a bit more spread out in the scopes here. If we go over to our waveforms as well, we're not quite crushed, but we are definitely getting there in some areas. And this is just to get the basis foundation of the whole dark look. Involved bringing up some of the luminance in the yellows and everything. So you can see with some of the signage and the floorboards, I just wanted to bring those up a bit, as well as his skin tones. And this was just to elevate some of the areas that I wanted to showcase in the film. So we are still in a pretty dark look here. The next big part that I did that I think works absolute wonders whenever you are working with subjects is doing a bit of foreground separation in terms of exposure. So what I did here was added a mask just on Ken's face. Now it looks a little bit like not contrasty at the moment because there's still a lot more to be done, but essentially we're using the first node, the exposure of everything is dropped down, but then I kind of bring up the exposure on Ken's face just here, and that creates a bit of separation. And the way that I do that is by conducting a bit of a magic mask. So you can see here, magic mask works really well. I just kind of select his face and then cancel out the stuff around the outside. And then if I activate the visual filter, you can see it does a really great job at actually selecting his face, and it tracks it forward and backwards. And then finally, of course, I put it on the better mode, as that does a lot more of a fine-tuned kind of a mask around his face and his head. So that's tracked, and it's pretty much scanned through all the way through, and you can see it does a great job at not spilling over onto the other stuff. You can see I've only done like 2 strokes just there to select that. So if I disable the filter there just to kind of see what's going on, and then afterwards, I'll just do some slight other adjustments. I mean, well, firstly, in this mask, you can see here in the color slice area, I kind of dropped down some of the saturation in his skin, as well as in the offset in exposure area, bumped up the exposure, as well as made his face a little bit cooler too. So just some slight adjustments. In the end, it'll depend on what you're shooting, but I like just to do the opposite on the subjects that I like to focus on in order to bring them out from the background. And going on to the third node here, there's some very slight changes here. You can see in the boxing mat in the background, there's a few little changes going on there. You can see I've just done some different hue and saturation adjustments. Typically, I would have actually used these graphs here, or these charts in order, or the curves, I guess people call them, to adjust different hues and everything. But I personally liked using the color slice. I think it's a really cool new tool in Davinci Resolve 19 that works well. So that just gave it a little bit more of a green look in the background with that. The next kind of node that I did is something I do standard all the time, and that is adding a bit of mid-tone detail. What this does is adds a bit of micro contrast, I like to call it, inside of the actual the footage itself. So you can see if I disable that and re-enable it, just at 30, it adds a lot of contrast in like his skin area and everything. And you can see if I kind of go on his face, it doesn't necessarily add sharpness, but it adds contrast in the grooves, and I think that's really pleasing, but you don't want to overdo it because it can have a bit of an over sharpened look. Next up, this is a really light node. Again, this is all kind of like comes together, but you can see the blue areas. If I go into my curves here, I kind of desaturated a lot of the cooler tones here because I wanted to go for a bit more of a grungy Zack Snyder look. I don't really want to say that, but that's kind of the inspiration for some of these things here. And then we kind of get into the Davinci Resolve effects where a lot of the look comes together, and this is just included in Resolve 19 Studio, I believe. I don't know if it's in the free version, but it is here. And this is the film look. This is where a lot of the work kind of comes together. So if you can see here, this is kind of the settings that I've liked to use. I like to get a lot of the grain, halation, and some of the color from here. In terms of what I start off with, I start off with a 65mm or whatever the standard kind of effect is. The core look that I've chosen is cinematic. I think everything in this area is pretty much what it would come out of the box. Split tone I haven't touched at all. I've done a little vignette. Some halation here as well. I think you really just need to tweak these according to what your project is. I wouldn't necessarily copy these settings, but these are the ones that kind of worked for me. My kind of goal is to do it subtly, but not to overblow it, because then it becomes like really obvious, unless that's the look that you're going for. Bloom, I think, remained untouched. Grain is the one I spend the most amount of time kind of tweaking. I like the grain to be really small, but noticeable, but not saturated. So I bring the size down to a minimum as possible, crank up the amount, and ensure that the grain doesn't, defocus the image at all. And then bring the saturation down to pretty much 0 in the end. Flicker, gate weave, I disable all those because they just add really weird effects that isn't quite suitable for this. And finally, the cherry on top, as people like to say, is just adding a nice vignette, which is, well, it's actually quite prominent when you disable it and you enable it. But when you kind of go in full screen, it kind of disappears / is kind of there. I wanted this film or this grade to look like you're always looking in the center of the frame, and it kind of directs the eye into that too. So that's pretty much how I graded most of the clips in this project. If I very quickly go over to some of the more simpler things, again, this one isn't labeled as nicely, but you can see I've got my my LUT, my conversion LUT, I've got my film effect here, and then the adjustments beforehand. This one doesn't have the vignette, but some of them do. Again, it's a very simple node process. I don't like having too many nodes. I've got, once again, the film effects, color space transform, and then all of my adjustments, which are very almost copy and pasted as each of the stuff went on. I didn't spend too much on this grade at all, maybe like 2 or 3 hours from edit to grading in total. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. Things like this, you don't need to go too crazy. So yes, hopefully you got something out of this video. If you have any questions about the grading process at all, feel free to let me know. But until then, have a wonderful day, stay safe, and do take care.